Okay, we're back at Metairie Cemetery here in New Orleans. And I'm going to tell you a story about someone who is buried here, someone very interesting and a little infamous, maybe a lot infamous, a brothel owner, a prostitute back in the 1800s. So let's take a walk and we'll try to find her grave. Her name, which she was known by very famously, infamously, I should say, is Kate Townsend. Yeah, but she wasn't born Kate Townsend, and she wasn't from here originally. She was born by the name of Catherine Cunningham, Liverpool, England. It's about 1839. And little is known about her early life, but when she was 15, she was already working as a barmaid in a dance hall in Paradise Street, Liverpool. Well, there she had gotten involved with a sailor, a young sailor, and she got pregnant. Of course, they didn't know that until after the sailor went back to sea. She had two twins. That's when she changed her name to Townsend. She left the twins, not sure who she left them with, but she said, I'm going to come to America. And after spending a few weeks in New York, she came here to New Orleans. About 1857. And she was a very attractive woman when she was younger. They say she was beautiful and voluptuous. And it didn't take her long to find a job in a brothel. It was owned by a prostitute named Clara Fisher, and after about 6 months, she left Clara's to work at a house in Canal Street and then in Maggie Thompson's house, another brothel. She was doing well. The house was doing well. And she met a lot of influential people. A lot of politicians, police, right? Well, now it was her turn. And she would open up the famous brothel of 40 Basin Street. And man, did she go all out. It was brownstone mansion. It had all kinds of silks, mahogany furniture, the finest of everything. And she got some of the top customers. Who are the customers? Well, politicians, policemen, rich guys. Yeah. Now, we did a whole episode on Bullock. I think it was St. Patrick's number 2 where he's buried. If you want to hear that whole story on how the prostitution all went the blue book, it's really interesting. It was all legalized. Storyville. But anyway, yeah, she was doing really well at Basin Street. And it was there that she met a guy about that time. And his name was Troyville Egbert Sykes, went by the name Ed. Ed was kind of the black sheep of the family, came from a rich family here. But they got along. After not too long, became romantic. And in 1878, Ed moved into the brothel. And he was there to, well, she was kind of using him, I think. He was there keeping the books and doing odd jobs and drumming up business. And it didn't take long before some bad things would happen. It was on July 30th, and this is kind of like the saloons, you know, in the Wild West. There was a gambler, and there was always fights, but there was a gambler named Gus Tanny, and he got into a confrontation with a guy named Jim White. Now, Jim had an argument with Gus after Kate had extended Gus with some credit, and maybe he was jealous, but Gus didn't like that, so he pulled a gun on White. But he didn't get it into action fast enough because White pulled out his Bowie knife and stabbed him right through the heart, and he killed him instantly. Now, what's funny about this whole thing, if there is anything to laugh at, is this, because the murder is nothing to laugh at, but the police come, they investigate it, they see everything, they're like, okay, yeah, self-defense, okay. Now we've got a Bowie knife and we've got a gun as evidence for what? No trial. So they gave both of them to Kate, and they said, here, keep them as souvenirs. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine that today? Yeah. Just keep the gun and keep the knife. They're good souvenirs. Well, she loved the knife especially because she kept that under her skirt, and that knife would come into play on many occasions, mostly as threats. But yeah, they just gave all that stuff to her. I guess that's the way it was back then. Well, it was October of 1883 now, and Kate became interested in a guy. There was a young gigolo in town named McLearn, and they got very close. There was action. And before long, Kate would let him come into her private rooms and her bedroom. Well, Sykes didn't like that. He was pretty jealous, and he let her know about it. What was the result? The result was they promptly came in and gave him a beating, Kate and McLearn. They just got him on the ground and beat the heck out of him. The next day, Kate was in the kitchen with her head girl, Molly Johnson. This is where she would start to become unglued, and I'm talking about Kate. She's in the kitchen with Molly, and she just grabs this big carving knife. Maybe it was her Bowie knife, I don't know, but she had a knife, big knife in her hand. She goes, I'm gonna carve up the belly of Ed. She was like fixated on getting Ed. Beating him up wasn't enough. So Molly finally gets her settled down, gets the knife away, and just then, I guess Ed comes into the kitchen. I don't think he knew what was going on, and she like attacks him. And she's, by the way, she's getting fatter and fatter, bigger and bigger. I think in the end she weighed about 300 pounds. And she like beat him up. He ended up crawling out. She was hitting him with a breadboard, like pounding him. And I guess he crawled out on his hands and knees, the poor guy. He was taking some punishment from old Kate, from Big Kate. By the way, we have a lot of these crypts here. This is why they call it the cities of the dead. And these are, many of them are reuse. And we talked about all this in the initial Metairie episode, how these spots are kind of recycled, if you will, a year and a day. But anyway, managed to calm her down after that, and they got through that. Kate's temper was getting worse and worse. The following month, on November 1st, found Molly and Kate and McLearn and one of McLearn's friends. They were at this cafe, and they were getting pretty drunk. And then Kate got into an argument with her boyfriend, McLearn. And he said, you know what? I'm going to smash a bottle over your head if you don't shut up. And she pulled out her Bowie knife, and she held it right up to his face. And he said, oh, no, 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 I was just kidding. I was just kidding. Kate, please settle down. Now, she was ready to kill him. But what's on her mind? What does she say? She goes, I want to go home and open up Ed's belly. And then she left the cafe. She was like fixated on him. Molly goes back, and she goes to Ed's room. It's like on the top floor. He had a room. And she's like, hey, she's coming, man. She's going to come and kill you. Lock your door, bar your door. And all night he's awake. He's got his door locked. And he's like shivering that she's coming for him. Well, she didn't come for him because she was so drunk she passed out. She had a huge hangover the next day. So she was out of commission. But she still was like threatening him. It's almost every day. I'm going to open up his belly. And he was trying to stay out of her way. And she was just getting more and more unhinged. 2 days later, on the morning of November 3rd, the brothel's housekeeper, a woman by the name of Mary Philomena, she heard shouts and screams coming from Kate's room. And she opened the door and she looks inside and she sees Kate and Ed fighting. They're like on the other side of the bed. Ed comes running over in the melee and he pushes Mary out the door and locks her out. And she can still hear more screams and furniture rumbling around and banging. And then all of a sudden there was silence. Door opens, Ed comes out. His clothes are all torn up. And he says, well, Mary, Kate's gone. Mary asked him, what did you do? He goes, Mary, I had to do it. And then he limped upstairs to his room. Now, Mary, who was now joined by the cook, Rose Garcia, they go into the room and there's Kate, big Kate, almost 300 pounds, lying on her back in a pool of blood. They tried to revive her, no luck. She was already dead. Well, they brought Kate into the parlor in a $600 silk white dress by the drawing room, and the funeral was November 5th, a day or two later. All the furnishings were covered in white silk, and the guests were served champagne, which had been Kate's wish. And they came out here to Metairie, 25 coaches full of women, followed by the hearse here. And she was buried in a $400 metallic casket. And I think the other legend or the thing that was said is she did not want any men to come. Only women to my funeral, and that's what happened. Now, looking for her grave, she's on Find a Grave. She is here. I went to the office. They spent a lot of time, and they went to the records. The records were almost destroyed with Hurricane Katrina, and we were actually, all of that, through a lot of effort, those records were saved electronically, and they go back. But you go back that far when she died, they had no record of her. So she's here somewhere, but nobody knows where she is. Back to Ed Sykes, there was a trial, and he basically got off because it was considered self-defense. There were 20 witnesses, so it was a quick jury verdict. But then the audacity, he produces this will, probably a fake will. It's like, hey, you got away with quasi maybe murder or manslaughter, but he's like going for the will. He's going for the estate. Well, it didn't hold up in court. He didn't really get anything. And I don't know whatever happened to him. But that's the story of Kate Townsend, a turbulent life of one of the famous brothels here on Basin Street. And yeah, she's here somewhere. And I don't think we'll ever know. All right, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Kate Townsend, rest in peace. Rest in peace.